I am speaking with our state senator, Bruce Tarr. Hi, Bruce. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you doing, Heather?
I'm good, thank you. And I understand you just had, literally just had a conversation with our governor.
Just finished our weekly leadership call, which is something that I try to tell people about because I think it really presents a accurate image of how things work in Massachusetts as maybe opposed to in other places. So once a week in Massachusetts, usually it's on Monday afternoon, there is a conference call. It used to be an in-person meeting when it could be, but there's a conference call and it involves the governor, the lieutenant governor, the Senate president, the Speaker of the House, the two chairs of the committees on Ways and Means, and the two minority leaders, and the House and Senate, the House and Senate chairs of Ways and Means, the Secretary of Administration and Finance, and the two minority leaders. And regardless, again, of party and which branch we're in, we all have a roundtable discussion every week about what the issues are that are facing the state and how we can best work together to try to address them. And I think it is very illustrative of the collaborative approach that we have on Beacon Hill. And it's a very important call. We try never to miss it. Once in a while, we might have to postpone it or move it based on things that might be happening, like a legislative session, but we try never to miss it. And it is a really good exercise, I think, in good government.
So this is Monday at 3:20, and it seems as if we should always be talking to you on Monday at 3:20 then, because we catch you right after this leadership call, right?
It generally is a Monday call these days. During the first wave of the pandemic, we were actually doing it twice a week. So we were doing it on Monday and on Thursday, but now we're back to our normal schedule, which is Monday, which is a good time because it's the beginning of the week and we're all thinking about how we're going to play our various roles throughout the week to come.
So what happened in the conversation today?
Well, so today there was a lot of conversation about the vaccination and what's happening with it. The fact that more centers are opening up and more appointments are becoming available. There was some discussion about the new 211 number that's been established to be able to provide information and to help folks be able to navigate the system who are over 75. We did talk about making sure that folks who might be over 75 and might have limited mobility are accommodated, because that's going to be an issue for a segment of that population that we don't want to leave out. So that was very important. And we talked about the continuing need to have more doses coming from the federal government. And that's something that's very important. It's important now, and it's going to be important for the foreseeable future. And then, of course, Heather, we shifted gears. We oftentimes talk about many, many subjects on these calls. And so we were talking about unemployment insurance and the fact that if we do not act, we are going to see a potentially significant increase in the assessment for our employers in the cost of unemployment insurance, because we borrow money and have borrowed money from the federal government to be able to keep the fund solvent, because we have so many claims against the unemployment insurance fund these days, and we have to pay that money back. And the insolvency of the fund that we have is going to require us to do something. And one of the things that would normally happen is the rate schedule would increase. And that could mean that for the average employer, the cost per employee, if we did nothing, could go from about $539, $540 to about $848 per employee. But the good news is, this is on our radar screen. We are all working on it to try to avoid that situation. There is some unclarity about what the federal government may do in terms of saying to the states, we are going to give you flexibility in terms of repayment of what you've borrowed from us to keep your funds alive. But we're also thinking about a bill that the governor has filed and the lieutenant governor, which would allow us to use the borrowing power of the state to reduce the cost of the repayment and pass those savings back on to employers. And that's a bill that's pending right now. So those things, I think, give you a bit of a feel for just how wide-ranging these conversations are.
So I'm going to ask this question, not remembering that well, but I vaguely remember the governor passing proposing some kind of legislation last session on relief for these employers. Is that true?
It's the very same bill, in fact. We did not pass it by the end of the session. It did come up rather late in the session. And so the governor has refiled that bill. And that was one of the topics we were discussing today, is how we might expedite the passage of that bill and whether or not there are other options that we might consider in addition to or as opposed to legislation. Doesn't seem right now that there are. So hopefully we'll be able to move on the bill fairly quickly.
Mm. And returning to the vaccinations, I just happened to see on the mass.gov website that there now are different levels of sites. There's red, green, blue, yellow. And I was surprised to see that. And I was surprised to see that their local grocery stores are offering the vaccine, local pharmacies. We're not seeing that around our neck of the woods, though. Any conversation about that?
Well, we are seeing it in one way, and that is there have been clinics that have developed at the municipal level. The communities, I know Manchester by the Sea has had one, Ipswich, Rowley have had clinics, Gloucester has had a couple in different forms, and over the weekend, we did see a clinic at the Rose Baker Senior Center in Gloucester that was run by the Veterans Administration. So we are seeing these pockets and these smaller facilities. But we actually did have a discussion about that on our call today. And the discussion was along the lines of, while these are important, when we get to the eligibility of larger segments of our population, they will not be able to reach the kind of numbers that we need to reach to get to vaccinating, again, roughly 85% of the population above 18 years old. So these sites are important. They're filling a need right now, but we continue to need the larger sites to be able to move through the larger numbers that we need to get herd immunity, which has been something of a very important goal.
So I keep waiting for the day when people drive to the CVS next to Shaw's on Eastern Avenue and get their vaccine. Is that going to happen?
Well, I hope it gets to happen. And I would say, and this is a bit of speculation on my part, that one of the things that's holding that back is the availability of doses. That if we had enough vaccine available, it could be pushed out to a number of different modalities in terms of its delivery. But when you have a restricted supply, it has to be distributed based on risk of exposure. And so that's why we have the tiered system that we do, and the rather constrained distribution channels that we have, because we don't have the ability to create an expectation that you're going to be able to go to one of many places and get the vaccine on demand. Hopefully we'll get there, but that is really contingent on supply coming from the federal government. We know that the Biden administration has prioritized getting more vaccine produced and distributed, and that gives us hope that we may be able to get to the scenario you described.
Mm. And how about the 211 number? Is that working for people?
It does appear to be. They had a very large surge of calls when it first became active, and that's something I think we would all expect. That has leveled off, but it certainly is very, very active. We don't have any reviews yet on its user friendliness, and that's something I'd like to hear about. But we understand that people are using it, and so that's a good start. The other thing that I think is critically important that we still do not have is a centralized registration system. And a number of us have been looking into that and why we can't have that. And in fact, my colleague, Senator DiZoglio from Methuen, filed a bill that I will be co-sponsoring to create that kind of a centralized system. Now, legislation is one of the slower ways of achieving that. I'm hoping that we can do it without needing to pass a bill. But I think the bill is an important statement by legislators that we think that having a front end of the system that's user friendly and that helps you navigate to find, for instance, a location that has appointments, as opposed to going down a number of steps and realizing the location you're pursuing doesn't have appointments. That's very frustrating. So hopefully we can get to a centralized system. And I think that's going to be a critical piece of getting to a better place in terms of increasing the percentage of vaccinations we're giving based on the availability of supply.
And did the governor or did anyone in the conversation today talk about just where we are with COVID right now with the pandemic?
Only in respect that the numbers tend to be trending in a very positive direction in terms of our rate of positivity of tests, the number of folks that are hospitalized, and the number of active cases. But one of the things I think we're concerned about is whether or not there may have been some gatherings around the Super Bowl, and whether that might translate into at least a temporary change in those numbers. Now, we hope that's not going to be the case, but we've seen when there are traditional times of people gathering together in our nation, we have seen increases. So that's one thing we're concerned about right now. But generally speaking, the numbers are moving in a positive direction, which is why you've seen the administration begin to roll back some of the restrictions in terms of business openings and capacities and things of that nature. And we're heading in the direction of maybe seeing some more of those. So generally speaking, we're going in the right direction.
Great. Well, I keep promising to let you talk about rules. So I'm going to continue this conversation next week. And well, we will continue the conversation next week. And I promise to let you talk about rules because I know they're very important. You're passing some right now.
We're going to debate them on Thursday. And they are very important. And it's something that I've spent a lot of time on. I'm very passionate about. They're not the most glamorous things that we do, but they do provide an infrastructure for public civic engagement, as well as transparency and accountability. And we've made good progress over the last number of sessions, but I want to continue to make that progress. So I will be ready to talk about that when you are.
Okay. And I know that you were frustrated at the end of the last session because you felt as if there was not enough transparency. Is that right?
That's accurate. There was not enough time for the members or the public to be able to read the things that we were acting on. And we also had some sessions that extended into 3 and 4 o'clock a.m. And that is not a time when many people are able to pay attention because their lives don't allow them the luxury of being awake at that hour and engaged at that hour. So I think we can do better. And we're going to attempt to do just that. In the rules debate that's going to happen on Thursday. Very soon, I will be posting our suggestions for rules changes on our social media so people can look for it there. And I'm hoping that we can build some consensus on making more progress on accountability and transparency because we've done some important things in the last few years. I want to continue to do them.
Great. Well, that will be hopefully at the top of the agenda in our next conversation.
Very good. And hopefully the leadership call will end on time.
Great. Well, I'm happy to wait. So, so have a good week and we will talk to you again next week.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.